Good evening, Cedar Falls. Welcome to tonight's committee meeting for Monday, December 19th. I call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer. Here. Cruz.
Here.
Harding. Ganfield.
Here.
Fires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Harding absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, a couple items on the agenda tonight. First one being with the Finance and Business Operations Committee. We will be going over the capital improvements program, and there is 90 minutes allotted for this topic. Tonight, I believe we will start with I guess a little information from our city administrator, Mr. Gaines.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Dunn, council members. I just have some real brief introductory comments, and then I'll turn it over to Jennifer Rodenbeck, who's got just a brief presentation. So we're here tonight, as Ms. Dunn mentioned, we're here tonight to talk about our FY20 CIP. Along with that comes formalizing our budget process. So really, this is that first step. I've been involved with the CIP for about 17 years now, and this has been one of the most difficult to assemble. And I think the reason for that is just because of the number of projects, the number of funding sources that we have before us, and also the complexity of some of the projects. So as we move forward with this, the CIP and ultimately the budget, one of the things that I want to remind everybody is Cedar Falls, we are in a very good place financially. We're in a strong financial position moving forward. And the reason that we're in that strong financial position is because of the mayor and city council and the policies that you've adopted along the way that's helped us guide us through the budget and the CIP process. So the other thing that I'd like to remind everybody is the CIP is a planning document. This is, most people look at the CIP as a planning document to indicate which year certain projects will happen or they're planned to happen, and that's exactly what the intent is. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you can also look at that document and see the financial indications of where we're looking for projects to happen. Helps us balance our GO bonds. It also helps us balance our revenues and expenditures that we have to make sure they're being administered in accordance with our financial policies. One of the things that, like I said, it's a little bit challenging. One of the things this year is with the CIP is, for example, in FY24, as we move forward, we don't have a lot of wiggle room, not much wiggle room at all. So in the middle of the year, this will be one of those years that if we want to add a project in FY24 and we're looking to do that, we're really going to have to look at, okay, what project are we going to delay or potentially remove from the CIP? So one of the other things that we've tried to include as we've looked through here is, as we all know, the cost of goods and services, the cost of equipment, the cost of construction has all been going up. So we've tried to take that into account as we've done some of the planning for these projects over the course of the next 5 years. And as Jennifer will get into a little bit more, but a few of the projects that I wanted to mention are projects such as the Main Street construction project, the Cedar River project, our Aldridge School connections, the high school pool, and the Unidome. Those are some of the projects that have been talked about and publicized very much. Those are included in this particular CIP that we have. I mentioned those just because they are some of the ones that have been talked about quite a bit, but they're just a fraction of what this entire CIP is. There's 212 projects that we have with over 50 funding sources in the CIP. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Jen, and she's got a short presentation before we can dive in.
Sure. One of the things before we get started is I wanted to welcome, I think we have some planning and zoning members here tonight, so welcome to them. So we invite them here tonight. I think years past we've presented separately to the P&Z, and I think we kind of wondered, was that really the best method? So a few years ago we just decided, hey, let's just invite them here on the same night and they can hear the the same conversation. So welcome to them. I don't have a whole lot more to add than what Ron already talked about, but just maybe a little bit about, we are doing a new method this year. In the past few years, you've probably seen me come here, highlight 10, 12 projects, go over those a little bit, but what we heard from council members through some of the goal setting interviews was that more of an opportunity to look at some projects more in detail and ask more questions as part of this process. So that's why you're not really gonna see kind of a formal presentation. Just like Ron mentioned, there's over 200 projects on the CIP for a total of about 460 million. There's approximately 50 different funding sources. So you will see there are projects on there that use a lot of different funding sources, and a lot of times it's the quality of life projects because we're trying to figure them out, or maybe they're the real big projects and we know we're gonna need multiple funding sources to get the project done. And then I think, you know, Ron mentioned a little bit about being a planning document. You know, this is, again, what we're planning for. Now, the fiscal year 23 column, the first column, is really everything already in progress. So there's not really necessarily a whole lot to discuss about that column. That's really probably just for information, because those things are happening right now. The FY24 is probably the most important column because it's what we're gonna base the budget on. So if there's projects in FY24 you really don't wanna do, then we will wanna hear about them, because otherwise we'll assume if we don't, we're planning on putting those in the FY24 budget. Now you know, the ones in the future years are important from a planning, but I just want everyone to understand that just because they're on the CIP this year doesn't mean we're automatically doing it in FY27. You know, there could be next year we're revamping the CIP and they may move. The other thing too I want to make sure everyone understands is almost all of the projects will come back to you in some kind of form, whether it's a design contract, a construction contract, a 28E agreement, you know, with the school, you and I, whatever it is. So I think sometimes people get a little nervous about, you know, if they approve the CIP, when's my opportunity to voice some other things that concerns about the project if we've already been past the CIP process. So I just wanted to remind people that too, that most things, we were trying to think of some exceptions the other day and we were trying to think of them, but they will come back to you in some form. The other thing, just again, you hear us talk a little, you know, a lot about general obligation debt. Again, following those policies, we're trying to time those every other year. And again, that's again why it's a planning document. And you'll see that, you know, we try to look at 3.5 to 4 million to sell to do replacement debt. You'll see that we're kind of at the top end of that, the 4.1 in 2024, 4 million 2026, and 4.1 in 2028. So kind of at the top end of that. Also other policies, you know, things we talk about in goal setting is, you know, what are some things we're gonna use general fund savings, what are some things on emergency reserve. We talked a lot about quality of life projects. So again, some things at goal setting. Ron mentioned about some of the big projects. Here's that list of kind of the real big ones that everyone's been talking about. Unfortunately, just a couple weeks ago, we got bids in on a couple of those, the river and the Main Street, which did have an impact on the CIP. So the CIP you had in your packet this time is actually different than goal setting, the preliminary goal setting, because we had to make some changes. A good example is Main Street. Because of the prices, we had to take Union Road, take it off the CIP and put it in the unfunded for now and push it out. So that's just an example. Things with the river project. There might have been some park improvement projects we had to push back or move to unfunded. So there are some changes that had to be done because of those overages on those projects. I know Kelly, like I said, we didn't want to take a whole lot of time because you know you guys want to go through them in detail, and I think Kelly as the chair is going to lead that. But just remind everybody what would be the next steps after tonight. If we get through all of those, we would actually have the formal hearing then on the January 3rd meeting. So that's when public could speak at the formal hearing, council would formally adopt it or approve it at that time. I think we also talked about tonight if there's a lot of detailed discussion about projects. I don't know if I want to say if this is the easy way, and that if there's things you want to take off the CIP, we can probably do those tonight, you know, through motions. If there's things about delaying or changing funding sources and asking, we may have to step back, the staff, and say, okay, we gotta kind of regroup on that and not really do that on the fly, and we'll come back with that, so. I think that's just, I think where we wanted to start, so I'll turn it over to Kelly, and I think as there is questions, obviously there's staff that can answer those very questions.
Thank you, Director Rodenbeck. So yes, I would not be truthful if I didn't say I've been nervous about this meeting, just in the concern for efficiency and getting through this without having anyone feel like they are slighted. But I do feel like that is my main goal, is to keep us moving. Getting in the weeds, this is a working document. I don't feel like we need to get in the weeds. If there's a concern, then I would like it voiced. I will go through this. I think we're gonna go well, actually, I'm gonna start off with the question of, is there a consensus that the document is fine? And we'll just move forward with the document as is. Okay, I'll take that as a no. Okay, so we're gonna go page by page. I assume that everybody's done their due diligence and knows if there's a concerning item that you are ready to pull that. Then my plan is for us to briefly maybe voice the concern of the item. And then I think what I prefer is to have the motion of pulling the item off the CIP. If there's a second, we'll go there and we'll do a voice vote, and that's how we'll proceed. And obviously staff is here if we need it. So the first page, are there any items that any council members would like to discuss or pull off of this first page?
Sure, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just have a question, I guess, for the 23, which I know you said is probably not something we can discuss, but the TIF funding for the downtown parking structure, item number 36. I'd have a question. Was that 2.5 in there already last year, and the line item is new for future funding of 24 and following? I guess that question would be for Jen. I know she's looking studiously, so. Sure.
It was not on there last year, so, but why we put that in 23, and Jackie can help me out, is that I think that's what we heard when we had a conversation with the council, that you want to proceed ahead and looking at what might be some options for location. Anything you want to add to that, Jackie?
Nothing. We just based that amount on some sales, recent sales in the area, so.
Okay, any other questions about that item?
Dustin, was that number 35 or 36?
36.
36?
Yeah.
Because my question was kind of also with number 35, they're kind of tied together, was the 35 was to do the feasibility study, but I don't know that we've received that. And yet you're going ahead with number 36, and they've financed, you know, $2.5 million and then $1.8 million. Shouldn't we see the feasibility study first?
Gonna go back to, I think the direction we heard from council was they know they want to do one. And so I think our thought was, from a staff perspective, we're not sure what the feasibility study would show us. Now, I agree. I think staff probably thought that's the first step. But we're based on what the direction we heard about a ramp.
So I guess that's the question. What's the 100,000 then? Is that just a place marker?
Well, one of the things we talked about is when we get to a point of having a ramp, one of the things we talked about is, would we have to do some sort of study about what the pay structure would look like? In other words, do you need to go 5 blocks out and still charge? Do you need to go 1 block out and still charge? You know, that's kind of more that, so I don't know if I want to say it's a pricing feasibility versus a location feasibility. Does that make sense?
Would this
Now,
be
we
a
may just-
combination of those two, or specifically a pricing?
I mean, it could be. You know, I think we're just kind of, you know, I think our first step is really about location and figuring out what's even available and what would be possibilities for a location.
Also then, oh, it's loud, along that lines, the type of structure, whether we throw condos on the top of it,
Yep.
a boutique hotel, the hotel pays for
Yep.
the
All of those things.
spaces and maintains it, and so on and so forth, so.
Yep.
So
Okay.
then wouldn't it be premature in putting the 2.5 million in fiscal '23?
Well-
We're in fiscal '23 right now, we're
Correct.
done with it.
I mean, we
so-
really had no idea how fast anything was gonna go. Now, the good thing about that is TIF funding. TIF funding's going to happen when we expend dollars, then we certify it to the county. So my point being is whether that's in '23 or '24 wouldn't necessarily affect how that funding's gonna work. It might just affect when we actually budget for it. And I think we knew all along, if something would speed up and go faster, you know, we could do a budget amendment for that, but in terms of how the funding works really wouldn't change. So does that kind of help? Susan, I probably preliminary jumped to location feasibility study when you first asked, but does that help?
So your feasibility won't include whether it's needed or not, it's just what location and type of building?
Pricing, maybe what type of building, right? Because again, we felt the direction we got from the council was, we want to move ahead.
And that would include putting out the bid across the nation for parking ramp builders.
Correct. Yeah, we'll get that far, yeah. I
Correct.
keep saying it that way because I feel like we have a big step to get to first, and that's location. We
Well,
have to kind of get through first.
I think we did see a preliminary post-it note.
Right.
Want to or like to or,
Right, now I'm trying to be a little careful about what's being said in terms of property acquisition and things that were done in executive session, so I'm trying to be a little careful about that.
understood. Well, post-it notes is kind of a general term.
Would it have created much difficulty if we would have just waited and done the feasibility study and put the other two items maybe down the road into the following years, maybe '25, '26? Or would that have really messed up all of your numbers? That way we'd at least have the report before we decide we're doing this thing.
I don't think it's gonna mess up the numbers, because like I said, with TIF funding, when that happens, when we expend it, is when we certify it, so I don't think it's gonna mess up numbers on the CIP and trying to rebalance anything. Again, we just really felt like we were moving ahead with the direction.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
I'd like to make a motion that we delay the TIF funding from '23 into '24 and bump each a year at least. Wait a second,
I'd second that.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
The reason I'm looking at it is, even though I know it doesn't affect things with the TIF dollars coming in, this year is gonna be hard pressed with funding, so if we do happen to find ourselves needing some other funding, that 2.5 being earmarked for a parking garage that we don't know we need yet, nor how to build it, nor where to put it, et cetera. We only got 6 months left in fiscal '23. Let's not earmark that. That frees up 2.5 million for other things that may be needed in the downtown.
And Dustin, that would leave the 100,000 for, okay.
Yeah, just line item 36, I'd be delaying it by a year to give us that opportunity to discuss over the next findings, whatever these studies come back with.
Okay, Councilman Harding, it looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, I just had a question. Being that it's TIF dollars and you say you certify it when you do it, I mean, is it semantics in what year it goes in? It doesn't really matter where you put it because we're not actually budgeting and using it.
Correct, and we actually have TIF dollars already committed in our downtown TIF, but again, I'm not saying, I don't disagree from logistics. I don't know that anything's gonna happen in the next 6 months anyway. I think, again, we just put it there in case an opportunity came and there's gonna be an opportunity for some property acquisition. That's why we put it in FY '23, in case that came.
Okay, and just to be clear, as I move forward leading this meeting, the current, the FY '23, that is not going to affect, that's already this year's budget. So we are working towards moving and getting to our FY '24 budget that we need to have certified by March something, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
So if this gets delayed, then we'll include it in the FY '24 budget.
Okay.
And we can do that.
okay. Okay, so there was a motion and a second. Is there any other conversations we can move forward off this page? No? Okay. So, can we do a voice vote for the proposed change, which was to delay the items in line 36 over, move them over a year? Is that what I'm understanding? Okay. A voice vote for that. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Nay. Okay, so that will be moved. Is there any further questions for staff?
Sure, I just want to make sure, so staff, just because based on some of Susan's questions, I just want to make sure then the direction didn't also mean that now you do want a location study. Maybe that would be a separate referral or separate motion at some point, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we don't lose track of that if that's something council does decide they want to do.
That'd be a separate referral, some.
Sure.
Yep, okay, sounds good. Okay, so we move to the next page.
Well, can I ask a quick question? The study, how far along are we on that? Or you're saying that hasn't officially began?
Correct. We have not done that study. Based on, again, the direction we got, we thought council really wasn't interested in doing a location study, so we did not proceed ahead with that. Now, do I think we're gonna get to a point of needing some sort of study about the pricing? You mentioned about what type of structure. Yeah, we might get there, but again, I think until we have a location, it's hard to do a study about pricing and some of that when we don't even know where it's gonna be located.
Well,
Yes, but
the
that's what I mean.
parking ramp study of 100,000 in fiscal year '23 is this year, this fiscal year.
Correct. And we
So-
did not proceed with it because we didn't think the council wanted to do that.
Okay, so to keep us on task and stay away from those weeds, can we please turn to the next page, page
Well,
number
Are we
2?
going to leave that 100,000 in '23 or move it to '24 for the parking study? I mean, that's an unanswered question. I mean,
Well, you still have
That-
6 months.
Right, and that's why I didn't want to lose track, Daryl. That's why I mentioned earlier, I got up here, I didn't want to lose
Okay,
track of if council wanted to do a location study and wanted to direct staff to do that, I assume that would come up in.
Referral. Okay, the next page of the capital improvements program packet here. Anything on page number 2 that this body would like to pull and talk about?
yes, number 58, community-wide strategic plan. They're showing it quite a ways down the road in fiscal year '28. The current comprehensive plan is dated 2012, as far as I understand, and it would be well due to be reviewed quite quickly. So I think that we had discussion during goal setting to do so. And I'd like to make a motion to have that moved up much quicker or have discussion to that effect.
Quick question before we, if I may.
Yes, please.
Is the community-wide strategic plan the one that is done by the citizens, or the one that is done as our master,
Correct.
'Cause there's two.
That's the one that's done by the citizens.
So when the one we talked about moving up was the other one,
The
not the
comprehensive
citizen.
plan?
Yes, correct.
So you're saying this one is the Future Forward 2025?
Yes, the item says future for 25 is item 58.
So this was the one that the community puts forward, and we get the stakeholders involved. So I guess what I'm saying is I'd be strongly to leave that one there, and then go with what we talked about at goal setting with the comprehensive plan, moving that up like we had talked about.
If Future Forward 2025 will be here in 2 years, and then we're not going to touch this until fiscal year '28, that doesn't make sense. Because when we had Future Forward 2025 discussion, the previous council, we just did a receive and file. We didn't approve of doing so. So it's kind of sitting there in limbo as far as I'm concerned.
So at goal setting, we discussed this just a little bit. We had a slide, so I can just go through that. In August of 2021, council motioned to receive and file the Future Forward 2025 through 2030, and that they also wanted to discuss it at goal setting, which was last year. I don't have any further notes about goal setting having changed that August discussion, so that's why we have it in the CIP under this date for that community plan, not the
So
comprehensive plan.
what's the date or the page of those slides you're talking about?
Probably have an old slide, so I can double check the page for you.
Okay.
Okay, but just for clarification as we move forward, am I correct in thinking the next item, item 59, is the comprehensive plan? Is that not what we
Correct.
will do sooner, as discussed in goal setting?
So in goal setting, we went through, in the CIP, back up. In the CIP, we have comprehensive planning and zoning in for a number of years in our CIP, which is consistent with what we've done for the past couple years. You know, we started off with the downtown, we went on to College Hill, and then the slide that we talked about at goal setting was once we get through College Hill zoning, then we propose moving on to University Avenue area for visioning, then possibly the Sartori High School, kind of northwest Cedar Falls area, and then the comprehensive plan around 2029, 2030.
I recall at goal setting, we didn't confirm we wanted to continue with the form-based zoning rework of the city. We were struggling with what's been implemented so far, and we found projects that weren't workable, and we had a lot of questions
Okay.
on that.
This is the weeds I don't want to get into, because that is not part of this discussion. So what change do you want to make with the item that you voiced concerned about?
Well,
Item 58.
58 is fine at the moment. 59, the comprehensive plan review, I can go with that. That's needed badly. But the zoning code updates remove the funding into the future for that, because that's not what we agreed to move forward with.
But that's not what this isn't saying we're doing form-based zoning or whatever zoning we might do. This is just holding the place and budgeting for any possible changes or things that might happen. So do we need to pull something there? It doesn't mean it'll be form-based zoning, it just is holding the place in the budget for it. Am I wrong in thinking that?
What number?
If we want to unfund it.
Now we're on, I think
Well,
we're talking now about 59, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, I have a question on 59 as well.
okay.
Is this 150,000 that's allotted for FY '24, is that what's needed to just update our current zoning, or is that for changing zoning?
So what we talked about at goal setting is that we'll be talking about what the process going forward for College Hill will involve. Will it be one of the two scopes that you talked about, Susan, or do we discuss something different? So right now, the funding there is just a placeholder. If we have to do a larger project, hopefully it covers those expenses.
Yeah, because I'm not understanding why we have to have that much money, $750,000 for this over 5 years. That seems like more money than what it should take to update the current zoning.
Okay, so at this point, does anyone want to make a motion to do something with this item? Or are we going to leave it and go from there? So what's the motion? Is there consensus? And we'll move forward.
Madam Chair, I guess.
Yes.
I would express, I'm confused a little bit as well. I would second Councilman Cruz's motion to move number 58 sooner, as in fiscal year 24 and 25. I know there is discussion about having accepted that one through 2030, but at goal setting, I recall that we've talked about needing to refresh that plan. And as 59 is predicated on some of these planning documents and processes, and we need to reevaluate the plan, that needs to happen sooner rather than later. So I don't want to make a dual motion, but I would second his motion to move the funding to 24 and 25 for item 58.
Okay, is there a second for that?
That was the second.
Okay, is there any further discussion about that? Okay, so a voice vote for moving the items that are, at first I want to say, does staff have any concerns about that before we move forward on that?
As long as it's getting moved to 24 or 25, that's fine, because we haven't budgeted for that yet.
Okay.
We would then know that if it is FY '24, we'll need to budget for that.
Okay, and I apologize because I have not done this with the last item, but I want to make, if there's this kind of conversation where we get to the point where council's made a motion, I do want to take time for public comment. Does anybody in the public have any, want to comment on this discussion right now? Okay. All right, so the motion is to move those items to 24 and 25 that are in item number 58. Voice vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay? Nay. Okay, so anything else on page 2 of this document?
Number 53, I wanted to ask a couple questions.
Okay,
So on the funding source, this will be for Jen as well. So the UNI funding source, I guess I'm curious why we include their funding in that project.
Well, we do that on other projects just because sometimes for us, is it helpful for people to understand what the total is, not just the city's share? Or to show that the city's only paying a portion of it? But you're right, we're not gonna budget for UNI's share, it doesn't affect our budgeting, it's probably just more from a informational that we like to include that. Now, we know the UNI number may change, again, that's kind of why it's a planning document, but we just don't feel a little nervous if we just put the city's funding. We don't want people to assume the city's only funding it at that point, that we wanna show UNI obviously has a huge commitment to that project as well.
I guess I'm concerned, it is in the CIP total though, and as you see.
Correct.
You know, I mean, I know you know your profession inside and out better than I do. I know Mr. Malone knows his profession as well, but it's written up in the Courier as though we're funding that entire amount.
Sure.
So the $16 million from the UNI's funding, I wouldn't want included in there.
Correct.
I would say additionally, just from an observation, that it conflates the numbers in the pie chart.
Sure.
To make it, you know, there's a little bit discrepancy there that I want to see cleared up. I guess I'd also, I mean, I'm struggling with this one, with this year being as tight as we think it's going to be. I know at goal setting we talked about being on board with these, but I'm almost perplexed how we're going to pay for all these improvements.
So,
Well,
This one's not till 25 and 26.
Sure.
Our portions, right?
correct. And you know, that's a perfect example, Dustin, we talked about is, so we won't be budgeting it for it yet in FY '24. You know, we're planning for it. We want to get on the radar, but that's also a perfect example where some sort of 2080 agreement or some sort of agreement with you and I will come back before this council as well. So again, I just don't want people to think by having it in there, that means the city's for sure gonna give them 3 million and all that. I just want everyone to understand that the council would have that opportunity to talk about that.
Given
Again.
we do have that opportunity, but it certainly gets ahead of steam before we
Sure,
come to
it
those
does.
opportunities if we leave them in there from the day one. So I'm not sure that I'm okay with leaving it, but
Councilman Harding?
Again, it's a planning document. You take it out, what precedent do you set to say that you're not gonna support it at all and staff won't look at it? That, it doesn't, that budgeting for it, we could find creative funding sources. It's there to see what we can do. Take it out, we can't do anything. So, you know, and again, we're not budgeting for it right now. It also shows a lack of support of the university, in my opinion, which is a foundational pillar of our community. So, I mean, you can always motion to take it out, but again, it's there, it's creative. We have time to look into it, see what's possible. You know, if push comes to shove and we don't have that money in '25 and we're budgeting, well, then we don't budget it.
appreciate that insight. Sure.
Yes, Councilman Schultz?
I think Simon's right on. That's where my point would be too, that UNI is foundational to our community. It's one thing for us to wear purple shirts and have UNI on it and say we support UNI, but this is really valuable to support UNI.
Anything else? Any other comments about that item?
Last one, I would second that having the 50 million in there could possibly confuse people and can you know, make the graphs look weird. So I would motion that we change it to just show our portion and maybe possibly make an asterisk and make a note somewhere else that it's of a bigger portion.
Yeah, we can do that.
Third.
Second.
Sure.
Yeah, yes, Councilman Schultz?
Jennifer, I believe this is not just the only line where we identify that, right? It's throughout the document that we divide out.
You'll see like school funding, you may see the railroad funding, you might see federal and state funding for a grant. Now this just happens to be a really big number that's on there. But, so we can do either way. I mean, I get your point about maybe it's not being real consistent with the other projects if we're not gonna go through and do the same with all the other projects. On the flip side, we can sure put an asterisk and a note and put the parentheses right behind the project and note, you know, UNI's contribution, or there will be a UNI match or something. So I think we can do either way.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
would it be possible to update that practice across the board if we think it's sensible here to do that on the other items as well? Is that too much to ask?
Well, I think we can do that. I think, you know, I want to go back to grant funding though. I feel strongly that it's helpful to put federal and state, I'm gonna pick a trail project, a street project. I think it is helpful to note, though, a lot of times that we show the grant funding, so we show it's an 80-20 grant. I think that does help, I mean, that does provide some information, I think, to people. Now, in terms of the school, you and I mean, if we feel like those are stronger ones and they are bigger numbers, I mean, we can sure do that on those.
So, question, I think where it's very clear to me when I look at it that says you and I on the bottom and you and I, it's just when we get to the total amount, it shows 50. Is there, maybe it would be a good compromise if we put, if we still kept you and I 47 and us at 3 million. I don't know. And again, maybe it's semantics. I get it. I just don't want anyone to look at it and
Sure.
be like, 50 million.
Sure. So, or if this is the only one and we just want to do it with that one, again, I think we can do.
Yeah,
Sure.
my concern would be all or nothing with whatever change makes the most sense, and I think I'm with Simon that taking it out of the totals compilation would be the ideal goal, and leaving it in with an asterisk for those that want to see that visual, that will be helpful in my mind as long as that asterisk is understood. Appreciate that adjustment, if it passes.
Okay. Any other concerns about this item or any other items on page?
We have a motion on the floor.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
We'd have to vote on that motion real quick.
Okay, yes, okay. So, and the motion to put the asterisks in?
Mhm.
Okay. So, do we have the actual motion? And you guys both made it. Okay, and now voice vote as to adding the asterisks in the items that are more than, I just want to clarify this for my own self. So, for instance, the river project, there's lots of different funding sources. Are we going to put the asterisks there?
Well, I thought maybe we were just talking about the Unidome at this
Okay.
point, but maybe,
So
or
maybe-
maybe you want to tell me which ones.
Yeah.
Maybe what we could do is when the outside agency is the lead and we're contributing, we can take the total out. So for instance, the river, where it has several different funding sources, but we're the lead agency, we'll leave all of those in the total in. Whereas the Unidome, for instance, we're the outside agency is the lead, so we'll just have our total in, if that's a good compromise.
I like that. That makes more sense to my brain.
Okay.
So I'm okay with
Does
that.
that make sense to your brain too, Councilman Ganfield?
No.
Okay, so,
I'd like to see the amount that we're on the hook for, no matter the lead agency, but that's just a preference issue. I think I wanted to reiterate, I would want it to see a consistent practice for every CIP item, not just the dome, so.
Ron, I think maybe I just want to make sure, I think what you were suggesting was for the Unidome, because we're not the lead agency, we would still leave our 3 million in.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, just the way you said it, I thought maybe you were disagreeing with that, so.
Nope, I wanted to leave everything that we're on the hook for clearly seen in here, and then the totals would be what we're on the hook for. In the documented piece of each, like say you get into CIP item number 53, leave the 50 million across the board there for construction, asterisk it, and then put our 3 million in the totals compilation. The 47 million also with an asterisk that University of Northern Iowa as an outside funding agency is not part of the city budget.
But you want that with everything that has outside funding. So the river project, you want to just show the cities in the total, not the private contribution.
Correct.
But you still want to show that there's private contribution.
Yes.
But what about the Blackhawk County Gaming? Then that's an outside funding source. Do we show that?
Show the amounts, but not in the total. Because we're not on the hook for Blackhawk County Gaming's items. That's all I was looking at.
But
I may see it differently than everybody
aren't we
else. that's why
already
we have it.
doing that by identifying that, like Blackhawk Gaming, BHCG, and et cetera? That's already being done.
Yes.
But maybe on
Yes.
this one, someone heard some confusion that the city was looking at $50 million, which we're not.
I think it might help if people remember the very last page, which tells you all the different funding and what their totals are.
I have concerns about I do like seeing all the different fundings. I understand what you're saying, but I feel like it's important that I see the total and I see each item. So, does anybody else have any concerns about that? So we can do this voice vote in I feel like there's two different things, because Councilman Harding, are you
Yeah.
seconding that? Okay.
So my original concern was just the fact that this one is so large that if you just look at the thing that says total funding amount, it says 50 million. That was just my big concern, was that I didn't want people to just see that. Whereas if you go over to the subtotal, it clearly states that you and I. So I do like the way we split it and how we do the other things. So I guess even though I made the motion, I'm falling more on the side of voting against my motion.
You can withdraw your motion.
I'll withdraw my motion, just for
Okay.
semantics.
Would there be a decent compromise to the page that Councilmember DeBura referenced? Could we asterisk non-city funds on this totals page just for community transparency?
Sure,
Okay.
sure can.
So I move that we add an asterisk to any outside funding sources on the summary page.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay. And any other further conversation from council? Any conversation from the public? Okay. So a voice vote for the asterisks on these items to make us go to the last page and see where they're coming from. All in favor? Aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes. All right, so anything else on that page? All right, so we'll turn to the next page. All right, any concerns with any items on this page, items 60 through 87? Yes, Councilwoman DeVere.
I have a question on number 64, which is it's just called Resilience Initiatives. You've got 150,000 total. What actually are we buying for the 150,000?
What we have in the detail sheet is that each year, 25,000 budgeted there with the CIP for implementation of actions at the direction of City Council. So we don't have anything specific to say at this point, but as opportunities come up, if they fit, we'll bring that forward to Council.
Can you give me an example of something that would fall under?
Well, in the past, I guess things that we've done is we improved the windows here at City Hall and did, I think, double pane windows versus the single pane. Those are types of things that we've done. Electric vehicle we purchased.
LED lighting at the rec center, I think, was an example of something we've done. Just for your benefit, Mr. Ward, that last year on the CIP, the description was actually resilience plan implementation. Well, based on the council's vote, we knew that's not what that item should say anymore. But in years past, we've always had this item for some energy conservation. You know, if those opportunities come, do we have some money set aside for it? So I just wanted to at least let you know that we did acknowledge about the council's action in terms of resilience, but we still felt like we wanted to keep some dollars in every year in case, again, some of those opportunities that we could bring to council. LED lighting, switching out some windows, whatever those may be.
Could we consider changing the project description to energy conservation so that it's kind of clear what we want to spend the money on?
Sure, yeah.
Because along with that, I'm looking back at last year's CIP, and as you say, Janet said resiliency plan implementation, and it was 25,000 all the way through. We declined to adopt the resiliency plan. So my understanding in years past, it was within department budgets that they did improvements throughout the city for various things, whether it be recycling or what have you. So, I mean, I didn't go back to the year before last year to see what was said.
Because I think the first year was there 70,000 in the first year though, because we knew we were gonna do the plan and hire the consultant and
50.
that type of thing. Okay,
50, then 25 straight through.
Okay, is there any other questions? I guess, was there a motion to make a change, or we can just
Well,
change the title?
I guess, I don't want to be a stick in the mud, but I'd say I'd like to remove that because my understanding is those expenditures for improvements would be in the department budgets as it was in years past, because we declined to implement the resiliency plan. That was my thought.
Okay, is there
Is that correct?
Well, I'm gonna say yes and no. What I mean by that is when we had energy conservations on the CIP in the past and had the 25,000, then it would get into the public buildings budget. So that's why I'm kind of saying yes and no. Now, I think if you're using some examples though of, are there some things we're doing in refuse that are, I can't think of an example, but,
Plastic
the-
recycling.
sure, that, you're right, that is part of their budget. So that's why I'm kind of saying yes and no to that it depends what you're talking about. I mean, if there truly are things that are already part of refuse operations, they're gonna have that in their budget. But this one, again, in years past, we've put the 25,000 in the public buildings budget if something came up, LED lighting, windows, that really weren't already in someone's normal operating budget. So I guess my answer to this is, if nothing's changed on this item, the 25,000 in FY '24, we would put in the FY '24 budget under public buildings. If you vote tonight not to do that and take it out, then obviously we won't budget for that in FY '24.
Question,
sense.
in various city department budgets, say Public Works, how much of a reserve is in there for intangibles? I mean,
I would tell you,
every nickel can't be allocated because you never know what's gonna break down and, you know, that sort of thing.
I don't know that we have a reserve, but what I would tell you is, I think in the budgets, what you see are the things that we know, or some of the things that we may not know the cost of. But as I said in some of my opening remarks, what you're gonna see, this budget's gonna run for a year and a half. So it's not gonna be over till July of 2025. And if there's any initiatives or opportunities that come up in that time period that the council would like to do with regard to resilience or energy, this gives the flexibility to do that. If we don't want that flexibility, it would be an easy one to take out.
Well, as a follow-up question to that, we had it for FY '23. Did we use it? And if we didn't use it, does it carry over?
It does not carry over because it's in the public buildings budget that's in the general fund, and so those don't carry over.
They don't
If
carry
we didn't
over.
do the project, and I don't know, Chase, if we've done anything in FY '23, I can't think of anything.
I don't know
But
off the top of my head for this.
And we don't have anything planned?
I don't think so, but I can't think of anything.
Then if we removed it from FY '24, it might help give us a little wiggle room.
Sure. Or maybe what you were suggesting is while we're doing the FY '24 process, we could say we do want to carry that over if something comes up. We could.
I'd make a motion to remove it from FY '24.
Second.
Okay, any further conversation regarding that motion? Okay. Any conversation or comment from the public regarding removing the item number 64, resilience initiatives, which we'll now call energy initiatives,
Separate
to removing it from the fiscal year '24 budget,
That
the $25,000.
Changing the name wasn't part of the motion.
I know, but I'm just clarifying that we've already said they're gonna change the name of it. Okay, any public comment?
One shaking head no, one shaking yes.
Well, I don't think we said we were gonna change the name of it. I don't wanna muddy the waters by saying that we're not interested in energy conservation. We would like to see more definitive scope of what this would go towards, what this 25,000 would go for.
All right, I apologize.
that
I
discussion.
thought we directed staff to change the name. I apologize. So item number 64, resilience initiatives, no public comment that I can see. So, yes, Councilman Harding.
So if we remove it, if it's not used, it doesn't get pushed forward. Where does it go? Does it go into to the overage of the budget that then gets used for a one-time capital improvement? Okay. If we remove it for fiscal year '24 and something comes up that we're not gonna have any wiggle room or flexibility to work on a energy efficiency or resiliency project if something comes along, are we?
Just said the overage budget would have overage, so we tap into that if we really needed to.
So this essentially frees up 25,000 if it's in the overage budget. Because this is, if you look at the funding source, general revenue. So
Yeah.
that's,
So I guess to clarify my question is, if we remove it from 24, is part of your motion that we take, if we don't spend it this year, that we push it forward to have that flexibility? Or,
Just remove it.
or you're just removing it
removing it.
altogether?
I'm removing it, and
Sure.
she balances the books.
Maybe to address your question, Simon, as fiscal year '23 gets to an end and we know what that amount is, what we could do as part of that, we always bring forward to council what that overage is in the capital. I mean, I can make a note that if we want to say we want to reserve 25,000 of that in case anything comes up for energy, we could do it at that time. If people don't feel comfortable doing it tonight, if you want to get it done and taken care of tonight, you can do that too. But we really wouldn't know the total overage until we get to the end of FY '23.
I get it. Yeah, that makes sense. I just get concerned that, you know, everybody wants to save $25,000, but if you have an opportunity pop up and you don't have it and you're not budgeted for it, not thinking ahead, and you can't use it, you can save a lot. I mean, resilience is a big part of the future. It's a big part of sustainability, saving money, getting future population here.
But anything that's using the funding source GR is what affects the tax rate. So if you want to help not increase your tax rate to the public, you want to really watch and be mindful of your GR spending.
Agreed.
And
But
we
you
should-
could also say that if you're not proactive in being resilient and being a proactive community, that you won't get a future generation to come here to build more commercial, to offset the resident tax versus the commercial industrial tax and go down that rabbit hole as well. So $25,000 towards resilience doesn't raise your taxes that much.
And also, if we spend it on windows, I can only think of my own home and think that the rickety old windows that I used to have in my house, when I put double pane, high efficiency windows, that in turn is saving me money. So that's how I think of it as well. Any other comments on this item? We are on page 3 and we've got a few more pages to go in 40 minutes.
I would just go back to the earlier comment that the resiliency plan presentation was not adopted. So talking about implementing resiliency, it has been turned down
Okay,
in that sense, so.
thank you. Now let's
Clarify.
do the voice vote. All in favor of removing the fiscal year '24 $25,000 for item number 64, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Nay. All right, any other items on page 3? Okay, moving on to page 4 of the CIP document, items 88 through 119. Are there any items on that list that anybody has concerns or would like to talk about? Okay, going once, going twice. Anyone? All right, we'll move forward to page 5. Oops, sorry. Page 5 of the CIP document, items 120 through 133. Are there any concerns on items of that on this page?
Well, Main Street reconstruction, number 129. There is a dramatic difference in the bid result and the estimate. And I think we definitely need to discuss that.
Okay, so to stay on task, and I'm not saying we can't discuss this, but this item itself comes up in our meeting today that we'll talk about.
Understood, I just wanted to point it out.
Okay, so do you want to remove this item, or what would you like to do?
At this point, we'll just leave it.
Okay. Any other concerns for any of the other items on this page number 5 on our CIP document? Okay, let's move on then to page 6, please. Page 6 of the CIP, items 134 through 160. Are there any concerns of anything on that page? Okay, any concerns? I assume we all did our due diligence before we came, so I'm going to take the silence as a no and move on to page 7. Items 161 through 200. Does anyone have any concerns for page 7 of the CIP, item 161 through 200?
Yes, Madam Chair,
Yes.
just taking a look at item 184, I know it's way out in the future, and I know this is just a planning document, but the fiscal year 28 purchase of an aerial truck to replace, I know obviously as those get out of use or out of viability, we need to replace them. I'm concerned here that weren't we saving money in our public safety budget, so why does this have to be general obligation bonded?
I'll start and then Jen can jump in, but typically all large purchases, like I think it was the engine truck a couple of years ago that we purchased, those have always been funded under a GO bond process. So Jen.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you meant by the public safety savings. Now, there are some just smaller equipment line items that may fall in the public safety operating budgets, but Ron's absolutely right. Anything this large, we want to plan for that because we don't want a one-time spike in property taxes for that year. So we're trying to plan for that GO funding out in the future, which I think at goal setting we had just a real quick discussion about it because I think it was kind of at the end of the last night. And I think for us, we also understand when you put that large fire truck out there that uses almost half of your GO funding for that year. So we know it is a large purchase. And my understanding is I think they have those on a 30-year cycle, but does that sound right?
Correct.
And so that's why, again, we're really trying to get it out there on that last year and start planning for that.
Okay, any other comments or concerns about that item or any other items on page 7?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
my question, why is that under Public Works, that fire truck? Says PW?
It's part of the vehicle maintenance program, vehicle replacement program.
Shouldn't say PSO.
All vehicle purchases fall under public works, so
Okay,
even the
that's all I need.
police cars and everything.
Okay, any other concerns or comments with page number 7 of the CIP? Okay, all right, then page number 8, items 201 through 212. Are there any concerns or questions about those items?
I guess Madam Chair, I had
Yes.
almost a similar question on line number 203. Why would the replacement of thermal imaging units for the fire department come out of the general revenue and not the public safety fund? Or is there a different fund? It's just all general revenue?
So general revenue would mean, so when we're done with the CIP and we're doing the budget, anything that says general revenue, we then go put it in that division's budget. So it's really kind of the same. So by saying it's general revenue, it will be included in the fire divisional budget for FY24 or 25 or whatever year it indicates. So if there was a general revenue noted in the parks one, we would go put it in the parks budget. We were just talking about the energy ones. We would put that in the public buildings budget. So those are general fund operations. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns from this body regarding the last page, items 201 through 212? Okay, so we made it through, and I think we're actually on time. Forgive me, but I need guidance. Do we need any other direction from this body to staff at this time?
So I think what I'm hearing is those changes that we talked about and made motions on. So for our public hearing that's coming up at the next council meeting, we'll make those changes. The document included in that packet will have these changes in it. But then we would proceed ahead to have that public hearing on for that night. So on your council agenda tonight is to set that date of that public hearing. So I think if we got through it all, we'll make those changes and we can present it in that document for that night.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So there is a second item on tonight's agenda, and I believe that is going to be, we'll be handing this over to Mayor Green.
Good evening, Committee of the Whole. So this actually, who are we still with? Is this Admin Committee as well, or Finance Business Operations?
This is Committee of the Whole, so I think it's Councilman Harding that's in charge.
Okay.
I'll take it. I'll go ahead and just hand it right over to you.
All right, thank you. This will be fairly quick, not quite the difficult discussion as before. I just wanted to make you aware of a few changes that I'd like to add in with the goal-setting document that'll come before you for final approval in our first meeting in January. So first, thanks to each of you for a very productive and well-deliberated council goal-setting work session. We covered a lot of ground and did so admirably and with spirit and civility. I have 3 requests for the document before it comes forward. The first change is to move the organizational excellence item. It's currently goal 5. I'd like to move that from being the 5th goal to being the 1st goal, because all other goals in the council document follow organizational excellence. That also helps us when we have the goal setting session, that we can cover 1, 2, and 3 in the first night, and then 4 and 5, which is economic development and quality of life, on the second night. So I think just logically it makes sense for the flow. So I'm requesting that change. The second is to relocate the short-term financial plan, which is in the back of the document. I'll just create a whole new section for it. Currently it's called Section 6, but the new format of the document allows for whole different sections of the plan. I didn't think about it when we first did it, so it's just asking to have that done now, which will be the permanent location for it. And then finally, the third change is under promote economic development. Currently it just says for the goal itself, promote economic development, create an environment conducive to economic development. And so I'm just adding, or asking that we add in the words, so it would say, goal 3, promote economic development, create an environment conducive to economic development for the long-term financial prosperity and stability of the community. So I just wanted to be clear when we have the document itself and we put it on posters that it says why we're looking to do it. It's not just promote economic development. So that's it. Try to keep it pretty simple. And what I would ask for then is requesting that the Committee of the Whole make a recommendation to the council to approve those the council goals, work programs, and financial plans with my 3 requested changes that I discussed, and open for questions.
All right. Any council members have any questions or things to bring up? Issues with anything within the goal setting document as well as the changes?
So we're saying right now we want to approve this thing in its entirety without,
No, we don't have it.
Right, to send it forward. It was in the packet.
It was,
And we're not asking to approve the final document. I'm just asking for the council to recommend approval to the council, which then it would be considered in our next council meeting for final approval. I'm just asking to move it forward to council at this point.
so really quick to recap, in the packet were the changes that Mayor Green wanted to have, as well as the red-lined and green-lined and all the highlighted goal setting. So at this moment, let's start with Mayor Green's changes to make it
Good question.
easy. So with the changes that he outlined on the memo, does anyone have any concern with those changes?
Well, are you talking about just the changes in the cover memo? Or
Yes.
I see that the color coding has got red, green, purple.
Just the changes in the cover memo at the moment, so, or the moving the sections around and everything he just touched on, anything with that?
Sure.
No color coding or document stuff right now?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Councilman Gamfield.
I'd move that we adopt the requested changes 1, 2, and 3 in section 2 of the cover memo.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to move those, or to make the changes under item 2 in the cover memo. Are there any thoughts or questions on that from?
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
So
go ahead.
Just to explain on there, it's just a structural change on these and then one additional wording
Correct.
help the citizens understand why we have the goal of promoting economic development. So there's no structural changes, no goal changes, no goal changes or verbiage changes, just structure of the document to flow a little bit better. So I don't
Correct.
see this as a damaging change in any way.
Correct. So with that, I'll jump to the public real quick. Does anyone, since we're making a motion here and the public wish to speak on it? You got the floor, Roger. You want it. All right, we'll jump back to council just on these 3 changes, the structure and the one wording. All right. Well then, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, that passes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just note, when it comes before you for the approval in the next like the actual council meeting, it'll have those restructurings done. So it'll look a tiny bit different, but everything that's redlined or green lined, whatever you saw in there currently, that's how it's gonna stay. There'll be nothing else added.
So with that, since we have some time, and Mr. Rogers, you can stop me if this is not appropriate, but since it was in the packet and it does talk about the format of the city council goals, is there anything within the document that you would want to see changed that was redlined or greenlined, crossed out, so that staff and the mayor have time to make that change before it comes back to council?
Mr.
Oh.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
I think the only one that struck out to me, I know we were talking through some of the resilience items and we had decided to forego those changes.
Sure.
But in section 5 of goal number 1, as it stands today,
Mhm.
section 5, line F,
Mm-hmm.
it says to continue to support the development of a city resiliency plan to identify opportunities. We've done that work. I think we just forgot to redline that line F. So I would move to remove goal 1, section 5, subnote F.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. Any discussion from the council? Any discussion from the public? All right. With that motion seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. So we will be removing that. Does staff need that number again, or? Okay,
On page 4, I want to make sure, Dustin, I think, section 5, letter F,
Ooh,
to delete.
page 4 of, yes.
Of 283 in the
Yep.
packet.
So,
All right.
yep, CFD 1101. And it'll get restructured, but that section, just note that we've already accomplished it, so it'll be gone.
makes sense. Anything else?
I guess, refresh my memory. We have green additions, we have red stricken, we have red additions, and I think I saw another color in here.
As I recall, if I didn't mean to interrupt you, but none of the color coding mattered. It was structural changes were all in different colors. So it wasn't green is this, red is that, purple is this. Any of the changes, if it was a strike through, it's a removal. If it's an underscore, it's a change or add.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's just for fun.
Yeah, just make it.
I think also
document.
it depends on who does the change as to what color it is.
It's just the version.
It's,
of-
yeah,
of
it's the version that it was done
Oh,
under,
I'm
so,
surprised we didn't have a bigger rainbow.
yeah.
The amount of changes.
So when it comes forward to us at council, the underscores will be, or the strikes will be gone. It'll be a clean version. Is that what I'm hearing?
We'll have-
You'll get both.
we'll get
You'll
both,
get a
yeah.
clean version and a red line version.
Perfect.
A newest version, okay.
And that's why we waited to do the mayor's changes, because by just doing a new structure, that was going to show a whole bunch of red line. So that's why we thought it was better to come here with what was actually talked about at goal setting, add in the mayor's at a memo, then we'll incorporate them if people are agreeable to them.
All right, any other questions or?
I do remember at goal setting, we ran out of time for a number of items at the end, and we were going to address those. How are we going to do that?
So I think you had asked that in an email, Mr. Cruz, and I sent that out with regard to, there's a number of items that the council already has talked about moving into committees as we move forward.
Okay.
There could also be, if there's something that you're particularly wanting to move forward, make sure you could check with the mayor to see if it's on the committee calendar or refer it to get it on the committee calendar as quick as possible. So we could do that. All right. Yes.
comment on that too?
Sure.
So just for Mr. Cruz's benefit, so at the next council meeting, we'll also have what we kind of call the minutes or report from the facilitator. And on that report, she has listed the things that were referred for future committee meetings. I think there's a dozen of them or so that she'll have on there. So I think that might be helpful to what you're maybe looking for too. Now, if there was something you thought was discussed and is on the list, then of course, might have to bring that forward. But that will be on that list, and that's coming that first meeting in January along with the final goal document.
Is there any chance we could get that sooner than that list?
Sure, yeah.
That'd be good to study. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember DeBoer.
Jen, a couple of the items are going to have routine expenses associated with them, and I wondered if it'd be possible for us to find out what those expenses are going to be and how you're going to budget them. For example, like on page 299 and page 300, one is talking about the sister city and having to send a delegation. Well, how much money does that cost and how do you fund that? And then number 300 talked about the employee survey every 2 years. I'd like to find out how much that costs, and there again, how we end up funding it before it comes back to us.
For clarification on the sister city and the delegation, that was stated that it would be in the mayor's travel budget.
Well, it says on here delegation, depends on how many people are they taking and how much would that be?
Fair, if there's other people going.
I mean, it's plural, it says delegation.
We can get some clarification on that then, make sure. All right, any other questions or comments about the goal-setting document? All right, well, it looks like we've covered everything, and we have approximately 34 minutes until the council meeting, so spend that time wisely.
You have a motion to
We don't,
forward it on.
motion to forward what on? Oh, yeah, you're right. We do need a motion to forward the whole thing on, I guess. We could. Do we need one, Mr. Rogers?
No.
We had a couple votes, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure what the last one was. If it was the entire document as reformatted.
Well, we made all the changes. We approved the mayor's changes through a motion, and then we approved taking out one line via motion, and that was it.
So I think we need a motion to move.
Okay.
Move as.
So I will
move
then
forward.
take a motion to move the document forward to council for
Mr.
approval.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move the document forward to next step.
All right. Is there
Second.
motion and seconded? Anyone from the public first? All right.
We invited Roger last time, Andy. Nothing?
Anyone from council? All right. Well, this is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So now we'll send that forward. Now we have expended one more minute, so we only have 33 minutes left until the top of the hour in the council meeting. So we are now adjourned from Committee of the Whole.